Hey guys, Sundown here. This is going to be my chapter review to Nanatsu no Taizai, or the Seven Deadly Sins 327.5. The King Sings Alone, the highly anticipated, at least by me, Escanor backstory. And to be fair, it was a good chapter. I liked it, but I felt like it was lacking true depth. It all kind of felt superficial to me, almost recycled in terms of like a shonen story. Even though I don't think Taizai is actually Shonen Jump. I think it might be something else. But in terms of like the age group and the stories we've seen through shonen in our time, it just feels very recycled and not something that I thought would be. I thought there'd be more history to it, more kind of intertwined storylines and stuff like that. Maybe more Merlin and how Escanor learnt or developed feelings for her. Maybe more of a kind of respect between Meliodas and Escanor, and less of a Meliodas kicked the shit out of him and told him, "Oh, you're not the only. Your life isn't only yours. It's partly." Rose's, in the sense of she saved you, so you owe it to her to live. I wanted there to be more than that, not just like it all felt very superficial. I'm not sure how to describe it. Maybe it's just me. But we start off seeing Rose's face for the first time, I think, like fully, allowing Escanor to escape after his family and kingdom deemed him a monster. Instantly, we're told what Escanor's mindset was when he was younger, and even up to when Meliodas kicked his ass. And essentially, while he was roaming Lioness, Rosa tells him he is not alone, but he believes he is. He believes he's cursed. He believes he should be dead. All that type of shit. So we move forward a few years where Escanor has been apprehended in Lioness and is at court with Batra and everyone else in attendance. He's been essentially taken in for his violence, for actions against the Holy Knights, for inciting fear and terror in the people and all that good shit, for being rude towards the king. And to be fair, I was more surprised that Zarathustra was somehow able to bring Escanor in, even if his power was waning and it was getting closer and closer to sundown. I don't get how Zarathustra would have been able to bring in Escanor. Escanor was sentenced to a whipping and execution by, I think it was crucifixion, so that's pretty deep, which is where Meliodas steps in and says, I'll be responsible for him. And Escanor seems to recognize Meliodas, just as Batra seemed to have at least heard of Escanor. So I think maybe Meliodas and Merlin had informed Batra of Escanor, or maybe Batra had just heard of Escanor's deeds or misdemeanors from other people, and this was the person that had come to him in court, which is why he was surprised. But Meliodas, at the least, seems to be recognized by Escanor, and Escanor in turn seems to and Escanor recognizes him, and Meliodas recognizes him. So Escanor is then introduced to the rest of the sins, making him the seventh. Everyone is keen to introduce themselves, asking what his abilities are. Ban and Galther are shocked to find out his power level is 15. Merlin then calls out to Escanor from behind him, dressed to impress. She's really there, really kicking shit off. And I was like, seriously? She was defo trying to get Escanor to stay with the power of hormones. And for the most part, I think it almost worked. Escanor points out how Merlin looks similar to Rosa, and then later points out, they both had the same kind of sad eyes. And I was like, okay. And this seemed to, Merlin was making a sad face as she showed those sad eyes later in the chapter. So I'm like, is she flirting with him? I have no idea. Which means that Escanor kind of has a thing for someone who looks like his babysitter. I'm not sure if that's wrong or right, but okay then. And it turns out Merlin and Meliodas had actually scouted out Escanor a few days ago after hearing rumors of his strength, which is why he seemed to recognize them and they recognized him. Escanor then announced that his specialty is poetry, and everyone proceeds to get drunk. He tries to steal away into the night, but drops one last poem about Merlin, only for Merlin to appear right behind him. And I was like, this biatch has known basically since her second encounter with Escanor that he has the hots for her, but she hasn't put him down, or she hasn't done anything about it. And I was a little bit annoyed by that, but then I was also like, I suppose it's not really her duty or her fault if Escanor hasn't outright made any moves, right? She can just keep him at arm's length, which she seems to have done. But he's very, very, very obviously got the hots for her, and maybe she could tell him not to, or give him some sort of do something to get the guy off your case, especially when it's that obvious. Anyway, Escanor's reasons for wanting to leave were so that his noon form doesn't harm anyone anymore, and he believes that he should have died way back when Rosa saved him. To be fair, I understand why Escanor feels this way, but this feels like such a recycled storyline. This is what I was talking about, incredibly powerful or someone with an incredible power sealed within them or deep within them. They need to unlock it or some shit like that. You know, this incredibly powerful individual or potentially incredibly powerful individual is deemed a monster because of how powerful they are, even though they're just trying to help. Isolated, they can't hack people being kind for fear of hurting them, so they don't value their lives and they want to die. I'm just like, that's something we've seen so many times, and it's not very original anymore, considering this is like the 100th time it's been done. And all this does really, when Escanor says all that shit, is it gives Merlin a boner, which gives Escanor a boner. But I feel these were two very different kinds of boner, and they both seem to be happy, but for very different reasons. Anyway, genitalia weren't the only things rising. The sun starts to rise as Meliodas approaches Escanor, telling him that the sins aren't easy to hurt. Escanor threatens Meliodas, telling him to stay away as he kind of gains that pride form. He's telling him to stay away if he values his life. Meliodas challenges Escanor to test out his power, which slightly triggers Escanor a bit, seeing as he's, that's the exact opposite of what he wants to do. He doesn't want to hurt anybody. So Meliodas pushes Escanor by getting a little bit closer, forcing Escanor to hit Meliodas into an unsuspecting Ban, supposedly killing both of them. You see Ban with his back kind of splattered against the wall, and you see Meliodas with he's just been caved through the wall. And unable to bear the horror of having killed two men, Escanor runs away, taking out all his fear and anger and anxiety and hatred on a mountain and leveling it to the ground, mostly. He leaves just kind of like the core of it as night takes over. He even assumes a one form here, with his eyes set ablaze and everything. Merlin then pops up when night takes over, and Escanor is in his puny form, where he explains how he helps people, but they always fear him by the end of it. And she says he should just join the sins to figure out the mystery of his power and how to use it, giving him Rosa vibes all over again with how Merlin continues to speak to him despite, seeing his noon form. Meliodas and Ban then turn up, making Escanor quite literally shit himself, and he gets a good hug of Merlin's legs here. I think that was, it wasn't just the kind of, he didn't want to just place emphasis on the fact that he'd shit himself. I think he wanted a hug of those legs too. But he genuinely thought he killed the two of them, right? And they just pop up and he's like, the heck is going on? So Meliodas reiterates to him here that he's not the only monster around, and how all the sins have heavy pasts which they carry with them on this burdenous life that they live. I don't even think burdenous is a word. When Meliodas asks Escanor to join the sins because of his useful power, Escanor gets triggered, saying the sins could never understand what he's had to go through. You could never understand my pain because you haven't had pain, all that type of shit, because of his curse. And obviously, he's completely unaware of all of their pasts. Gartha gives us a little backstory here, but mostly stuff we already knew apart from the name of the kingdom, which was Talim, I think, or Talim. Hey, Talim. But essentially, Escanor was exiled from his kingdom and hunted down as a result of this curse, and his caretaker Rosa betrayed the kingdom in order to save him from them. Escanor then returned years later to find the kingdom in ruins and no sign of Rosa, something he blames himself for. Even when Merlin offers to take him to Rosa, Escanor says he couldn't face her after all that had happened to her on his account, and that his life is worthless, and Rosa would be happier if he was dead. This pisses off Ban, who lifts Escanor by his collar, basically telling him to either shut the fuck up or die. On the spot. He's like, you gotta shut up or just die. Stop your heart. Stop it beating right now. Anyway, Meliodas then interjects, telling Escanor to fight him at high noon the next day. So, we then go to high noon the next day. Escanor assumes the one form, surprising even Merlin with his power level, and he just straight sucker punches Meliodas, a straight uppercut, telling him how he envies Meliodas for his capability to die, how easy it is for Meliodas to die. Meliodas, to be fair, takes the punch like a champ, and then suddenly assumes assault mode, like out of nowhere. Demonic Mark, he's got the huge shoulder pad looking things, and he returns the sucker punch to Escanor right back in his face, dropping him straight to the ground, and he steps on Escanor's throat, telling him, if you wish to die that badly, I could kill you right now. Just give me the word, I'm gonna take your head off. So this is where everyone's been going apeshit about the chapter. People have said, they're either disappointed with how, like I said, superficial the chapter has been, or the power levels. That's what they've been like really talking about. And I was like, you know what? For once, I'm not actually complaining about the power levels. I understand that Escanor was in the one form, but this is a very young Escanor to begin with. So I don't think the one form was like put it in perspective, right? When Escanor first got his grace, we don't see that. We don't see how he actually inherits this grace or how he gets this grace. So that was disappointing, I suppose. We didn't see like any history of this light beam shone on him from afar or something like that, and suddenly he became a little baby ogre or some shit like that. We didn't get any of that. But what was I talking about? The grace. Yeah. So we didn't. No, I wasn't talking about the grace. What were we talking about? Oh yes, I was talking about Meliodas one-shotting Escanor. That's what a lot of people have been focusing on, and like I said, from when he first got the grace to his age in this backstory, I'm assuming that the one form continued to get more and more powerful as Escanor's base form continued to get kind of more and more powerful, in the sense of as he matured, his the one form kind of matured as well. So this was a much younger Escanor. I think it might have been within the remit of about 10 to 20 years, maybe 10 to 15 years. So this is quite a young Escanor, and his the one hadn't really ever been challenged before, nothing like that. So it was kind of like I'd go with the argument of he was unaware, but it's more along the lines of he just got his ass whooped by Meliodas here, because I think he was simply too weak. He hadn't, his grace hadn't matured enough, his control over his grace hadn't matured enough, and he simply didn't have enough power at that moment in time to be able to take assault mode Meliodas. And then there's also the talk behind Meliodas actually achieving assault mode. I was like, the fuck? When I saw it, I was like shaking a bit. I was like, wait a sec, can Meliodas go assault mode? Like, could he have gone assault mode? I understand that this is before no, actually this wouldn't have been before. So when was Meliodas' so Meliodas' power was stolen from him when they were accused of killing Zarathustra, right? So Merlin kind of took his demonic power, and then I think that was sealed away with the did she seal it away with the druids, or was that when Danafor was blown up and then Meliodas had to seal away his demonic power? One of the two, but he shouldn't have had the capability to go assault mode like that, I don't think, unless this was kind of because this was before when Merlin took his power, then he was able to assume it. But the only time we'd ever seen him assume assault mode, even when he got his powers back from the druids and from Merlin, which might have been the same thing, I can't really remember. We never ever saw him assume assault mode until after he died, and then he had his emotions drained, and then he came back, and then he assumed assault mode. So has he always been able to assume assault mode, like since he got his powers back before dying, and he just chose not to, or was that something he could only do when his emotions were drained? Because he seemed to do it quite easily here, and he didn't seem to have a care for like, maybe the darkness will overtake my soul or some shit like that. Nothing happened. He just assumed assault mode and kicked the shit out of Escanor. I was like, alright, cool. So let me know what you guys think of that actually. Whether he should have actually been able to achieve assault mode or not, I'm not sure. I don't think technically he should have been able to, but I haven't reread Taizai ever, so maybe there's a lack of understanding on my part. Anyway, where are we? So what the shit? Oh yeah, so Meliodas then tells Escanor that his life isn't his alone. Like I said before, seeing as Rosa saved him, and to think of throwing away his life as if he was the only one who owned it is impudent, something which makes Escanor cry. Really emotional part. I actually like that part. Meliodas then tells Escanor he'd be glad to take him on if he ever goes out of control again, with Escanor asking to request something. He passes out though, so they assume he wanted to see Rosa. It could have been a very different request. He could have asked for Merlin's hand in marriage or something like that. All we know is that he passed out. Anyway, with Escanor unconscious, Merlin is actually able to transport his mind, soul to the capital of the dead, where he meets with Rosa after so many years. And this part was super emotional as well. Just from the perspective of, this lady who almost is like a mother figure. She was his caretaker. He gets to see her again. He starts off with, the same Escanor we've seen in this backstory, which is very kind of timid, blaming himself for everything. And he's like, you don't want to see my face. And then he kind of, after what Meliodas says to him, he straightens his back up a bit, and he has a long chat with Rosa, probably getting years off of his chest, with her informing him that, you know, I've been watching over you and I can see that you're no longer alone, referring to Meliodas and Merlin, but also to the rest of the sins. He swears an oath to Rosa here as she pops out of existence, telling her that the life she saved and that he had once given up on, he would lay it all on the line for his friends, which is like death flags deluxe, right? So it was a nice emotional part of the chapter, and this chapter as a whole was a nice, slightly emotional chapter. But like I said, I didn't feel that depth in the history of Escanor without the sins, you know. That's what I think I wanted, a history of Escanor without the sins, you know, proper history. Like a bit like the Ban side story. We got a whole other side of Ban. We've seen his parentage, his upbringing, his escapades with freaking what's her name, Elaine, and all that shit that happened. We got a solid backstory with Ban, but we didn't get that with Escanor, which is where I'm disappointed. And to be fair, I thought there'd be more of a history behind Rita as well, but I've seen people's points on this in the terms of we don't really get much of a history behind sacred treasures and what their names are and stuff like that. But I just felt like Rita was one of the more important sacred treasures in the sense of, you know, we got a bit of a history on the naming before, in the sense of Rita was the person who once fell in love with the sun or some shit like that. So I was like, okay, maybe there'd be more to that, but we didn't get that. And we didn't even get a kind of a backstory as to how Rita got her name. Did Escanor name her? Did Batra name her because of this legend of Rita or something like that? And we didn't even we didn't get anything on in terms of, there was an inconsistency with Meliodas in the current timeline. He fought Escanor at high noon, right, when we first saw the one, as if he didn't already know about the one, but according to this, he knew about the one. He's seen Escanor full freaking size. He knew about the one, and Escanor as well also knew about assault mode Meliodas, but he was acting like he didn't. So it's a little bit of an inconsistency here, where they both should have known what their peaks look like. Not necessarily how much they'd advanced in that time, but they should know that he has another form that he's hiding. But in the current time, in the present day, when they both saw each other in the one and in assault mode, neither of them seemed like they'd seen each other in that mode before, which is really a bit weird. But other than that, I like the chapter. I thought it was pretty good. So let me know what you guys thought of this chapter. Let me know what you guys thought of this review. Like, comment, subscribe, all of that good stuff. And I'll see you guys hopefully tomorrow when I release both my One Piece and My Hero Academia review. So I'll see you guys in a bit.